I would say US is really the melting pot of, building great engineers. And, some of the great innovations of the last 100 years have come from that country. And when you got these professors all over the world to come in and talk about the fifth year and talking about these professional skills, as you call it, uh, why is it that engineers find it hard to really, develop these skills? Say, for example, the communication skills, the decision making skills, working with people. So, where do you think they hit a knot, if I were to call it, or a bottleneck? And why is it that this becomes a fundamental, block for them?
I think it has a lot to do because, in my experience, I think engineers have an analytical mind, and life is very easy for them when it's 1-0 on off, yes, no, where fluid flow can be measured precisely. But in life, you don't really have that opportunity, or you don't have that advantage, because human beings are probably in order to proceed and design things, your audience is going to be human beings, and you have to understand your audience before you design something. And human beings are a different breed. They're not as simple as machinery, and they're not as simple as calculus, believe it or not, because and they tend, engineers are very rational and logical and analytical, and the rest of the world really isn't. There's crazy things happening that don't make sense, but they continue to happen. And I think it's hard for an engineer or somebody with that mindset to adjust to that, or to even feel comfortable in that type of environment. So I think, in the book, I think one of the most perfect examples of that engineering mindset is Herbert Hoover. And I do a case study on Herbert Hoover. And believe it or not, he was a president that was in office in the United States right at the beginning where the Great Depression happened. And he's always had if you mention Herbert Hoover to somebody, they immediately think, oh, he caused the Great Depression. He was a disaster. But if you study his life, he was an engineer. He was the first engineer to become a president of the United States. He was a brilliant man. He was graduated from Stanford University, went out and made a fortune, retired at a young age over in London. He was referred to in the mass media as the great engineer, because he was like Elon Musk of today. Everybody knew his name and everybody respected him. And the outbreak of World War I, the British government and the Allies relied on him. He was such an incredible organizer, and he organized the food relief for Belgium and northern France, and negotiated with the Germans and the British to make sure the ships could get through the British blockade, and that make sure that the Germans wouldn't steal the food once it got there, and they would distribute it to the the population in Belgium. He came back to the United States, became Secretary of Commerce, completely reorganized the government, made it much more efficient. And everything he touched as an engineer, from an analytical standpoint, he did a marvelous job. And he was known as the great engineer. And he easily won he won election to become president in 1928. But as a president, you have to deal with people. And as a president, you have to deal with politics, and that's probably the worst side of people is politics. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't lie. He had a hard time talking to people. And one of his aides said, when he gave a speech, it's like he's reading from a book. He doesn't even look up. But to him, as an engineer, he's relaying the information to the people, and that's all he needs to do. He never felt the need to go out and shake people's hands and be comfortable with people. And because he didn't have these skills, and then when the Great Depression happened, when the stock market crashed, he looked at it as if it were an engineering problem to be solved. And so he started putting up these different gates and barriers and he's trying to apply engineering to economics. And economics is, just an outcome of people and market. There are no engineering rules to go with economics. And he tried to instill some and made the Great Depression even worse. And to make things final, here's this man that was honored and considered one of a great engineer. He ran for re-election, and he was up against probably the most suave, most political type of personality, in the country at the time, and that was Franklin Roosevelt. Herbert Hoover went into this re-election thinking he was going to win again by another landslide, and he lost by the biggest landslide in American history. And after that, he was just kind of ignored and just put out, what they say, put out to pasture. I think he never could learn from his experience. And to me, that is a viewpoint or a view of a person who has magnificent engineering skills, but doesn't have the people skills, doesn't have the professional skills to go along with it. And it was a perfect case study for the book. And I think any engineer that kind of can look at Herbert Hoover, and I'm an engineer, and I can reflect on his experiences and what he went through. And you say to yourself, well, why didn't you speak better? Why didn't you get more, go out there and shake hands and be comfortable with people? Well, he wasn't designed to do that, and he just couldn't get over it. And what I wanted to try to do with the fifth year program is to look at those potential Herbert Hoovers out there within NASA and teach them that you can become not only a great engineer, you can become a great leader, but you have to learn these professional skills. And sometimes, and for most engineers, I'll be honest with you, I think the professional skills are harder to learn than the calculus and the math and the dynamics and the thermodynamics and those type of subjects. So that was the goal of the fifth year program, and Herbert Hoover was kind of my model in designing it.